going over to the next presentation, which is on lung volume reduction surgery. So we'll have a brief look at the evolution of lung volume reduction surgery. The aim of LVRS was to give a safe, effective, and durable palliation of dyspnea in selected patients with moderate to severe emphysema. So it started off with Otto Brantingen, a thoracic surgeon, doing a pneumonectomy for dyspnea in 1959. It was observed that following this surgery, there was a significant amount of post-op morbidity. Then around four decades later came partial pneumectomy by Cooper et al. And the patients following this surgery was followed up, and it was seen that there was a significant increase in the mean FEV1 with reduction in total lung capacity and residual volume. By 2003, bronchoscopic lung volume reduction was first described. So first we'll look at the surgical LVRS. So surgical LVRS has both unilateral and bilateral surgeries. The surgeries, the open thoracotomy surgery is median sternotomy. They open, and mechanical staples or laser stapling is done by using carbon dioxide or Nd:YAG lasers. So one major complication that developed was that in these stumps, there was a air leak which was developing either from the stumps or some other damaged portion of the lung. The lasers contributed in the patients who underwent laser stapling. It was seen that there was delayed pneumothorax in around 20% of the patients. The National Emphysema Treatment Trial was done, the NET trial, which is a landmark trial in LVRS, which compared the surgical versus medical treatment of these patients. One important thing that has been noted, and in all the selection criteria, the candidacy, everything has evolved from this trial. So from this trial, a multidisciplinary cooperation between the surgeon, pulmonologist, nursing, rehab, people have been noted for a successful outcome of the palliation. And it's important to keep in mind that this surgery is done as a palliative measure for these patients. So also a brief background, like emphysema is classified as homogeneous as well as heterogeneous based on the involvement of emphysema of the lobes. So if there is more than 10% variation in the emphysematous destruction between the upper and lower lobes, it is termed as heterogeneous disease. So the identification is done by using a density mask which highlights areas with emphysema more than 910 Hounsfield units. If you can see, there are purplish markings denoting the areas. So the evaluation process in this NET trial, first there was a screening process, and subsequently the patients went into a pulmonary rehab which was monitored for 6 to 10 weeks. And then there was a formal evaluation following this rehabilitation. So in the screening, patients' history was taken, basic tests like chest X-ray, lab investigations with HRCT, full PFT, and alpha-1 antitrypsin testing was done. And they went into pulmonary rehabilitation, which was monitored. Weekly sessions were assigned and they were monitored. And then at the end of this rehabilitation, they were re-evaluated, and dyspnea was scored, room air ABG, CPET 6-minute walk test for exercise capacity, board scoring was done, and quantitative lung perfusion, nuclear scanning, echo, and MDT evaluation was done prior to taking up for surgery. So in the NET trial, done between 98 and 2002, 1,218 patients were randomized into surgical and medical therapy arm, 600 patients each. And in the surgical arm, median sternotomy group was around 70% and BATS was around 30%. So the goal was to resect around 20 to 35% of the most diseased portions of each lung. The main outcomes that they have looked in the study was mortality and maximal exercise capacity 2 years after randomization. So if you notice in this table, given the 90-day mortality, which in the surgical arm was 7.9% as opposed to 1.3% in the medical arm, which was statistically significant. There was a high amount of mortality, short-term mortality, which was seen following surgery. This, at the end of the follow-up period, which was around 29.2 months, had more or less been the same. Now, the second primary outcome was the exercise capacity improvement by, which they have defined by improvement by around 10 watts. The follow-up was done at 6 months, 12 months, and 24 months. And in each of these subgroups, it was noted that the patients who had surgery had a significant improvement in the exercise capacity. However, it was noted when the patients were subclassified as upper lobe predominant or lower lobe non-upper lobe predominant with high or low baseline exercise capacity, the probability of death in patients who had upper lobe predominance with a low baseline exercise capacity was higher in the medical therapy arm. It was significantly different. So surgery benefited this subset of patients who had an upper lobe predominance with a low baseline exercise capacity. However, this, as opposed to that, the non-upper lobe predominant with a high baseline exercise capacity had a significant mortality in the surgical arm. So, candidacy, an appropriate or a good candidate for surgery was a candidate who was less than 75, who had not many significant cardiovascular comorbidities or pulmonary hypertension at rest. He should have been an ex-smoker, stopped smoking more than 4 months, clinically identified as emphysema with no other background pathology running, with significant functional limitation after 6 to 12 weeks of pulmonary rehab. Based on spirometry, the post-bronchodilator FEV1 less than 45% for all ages and more than 15% for age more than 70 was taken into consideration. And if it is less than 20% of FEV1 or DLC or less than 20%, he was at a high risk. The TLC more than 100% in RV by residual volume more than 150% predicted was also taken as a criteria for a good candidacy. HRCT demonstrating bilateral severe emphysema with ideally upper lobe predominance, as we saw the difference in the outcomes. Now going over to the bronchoscopic LVRS. So there are multiple procedures that can be done, starting with endobronchial valves, stents, coils, then thermal ablation. So these techniques can be divided as block techniques versus non-block techniques. So block techniques is you put in a valve and you block that disease segment. Or a non-block valve, the non-block technique is where you use a coil or a thermal ablation and cause scarring there and block the segment. So this can be also subdivided as definitive versus non-definitive. Definitive is when the procedure can be reversed, cannot be reversed, and non-definitive is the reversible procedures which involves placement of valves. So one important concept in bronchoscopic LVRS which determines the success is collateral ventilation. So identifying collateral ventilation is critical to predict success of this procedure. So selection of patients, like for surgical LVRS, we have to identify emphysema, FEV1 less than 45%, TLC more than 100%, RV more than 175, and 6-minute walk distance more than 100. So the contraindications for this would be cannot tolerate a bronchoscopy, active lung infection, active smokers, allergy to these device materials, and a large bullae greater than 1/3 size of the lung. So collateral ventilation, the concept which is identified for by doing a HRCT or by using what is called as the Chartis pulmonary assessment system. So a low dose thin slice volumetric CT is done, so 0.5 to 1.5 mm sections. And this has an accuracy of around 75% to predict whether there's a collateral ventilation. That is whether the fissures are complete or not complete. If it is incomplete, there will be collateral ventilation happening. And if you do a blocking procedure, that's not going to be successful. So the non-candidate target lobe or can be identified when there is a incomplete interlobar fissure of less than 80%. So once we do the HRCT, we know whether the emphysema is homogeneous or heterogeneous. If it is homogeneous, we already can say that there are significant amount of collaterals there. And if it is heterogeneous, out of all the heterogeneous emphysema patients, 40% of these patients may still have significant collaterals. So unless the fissure completeness by HRCT is predicted to be more than 95%, if it is more than 95%, we can straight away do a endobronchial valve treatment. Otherwise, they in studies they have used a balloon catheter system during bronchoscopy. Just the Chartis pulmonary assessment. So you go with the bronchoscope, you occlude that segment, and the pressure and flow is detected through a sensor in the bronchoscope, and you see the graph. So over a period of time, the flow and the pressure will decrease if there is no collateral ventilation. It will decrease if there is no collateral ventilation. If collateral ventilation is there, it will continue to maintain that flow. So based on that, we'll be able to assess if there is collateral ventilation or not. The first technique is the endobronchial valves. It is mainly identified as useful for heterogeneous emphysema. So two types are there: endobronchial valve and intrabronchial valve. So in the endobronchial valves, there is a duct build valve as well as an umbrella system. The duct-built valve is called as commercially known as the Sapphire valve, which is physiologically mimicking the LVRS, and IBV limits airflow to the deceased distal lobe. So during expiration alone, this valve will open and have a communication, the EBV. Now, the success of this, as we have just understood, is depending on the absence of collateral ventilation. The cost is coming to around €10,000 for this valve. There's a landmark trial which was done for endobronchial valve. It's called the endobronchial valve for emphysema palliation, or the VENT trial, done between 2004 and 2006. And 220 were trials into the randomized into the EBV group and 101 into the standard medical care. And before randomization, 6 to 8 weeks of pulmonary rehabilitation was given. So at 6 weeks, it was noted that there was an increase in FEV1 by 4.3%, and the difference between the two arms was 6.8%, which is statistically significant. And also the 6-minute walk distance increased in the EBV group, and the difference was a 5.8, which was statistically significant. But these increases were just modest increases which were observed, and that they attributed to collateral ventilation being present in most of these patients who underwent the valve. So what they concluded from the study is complete occlusion of target lobe and near complete fissure of more than 90% would have been associated with much better outcomes, and that was seen in a subset population. In this study, there was no procedure-related mortality. The next technique is the thermal vapor ablation. So as we can see through bronchoscopically, we go in and the vapor catheter is positioned in a target segment airway, and it's occluded by a balloon, and a vapor is applied. So this is controlled doses of steam. Usually 10 calories per kg is given for 3 to 10 seconds, which induces an inflammatory response, and lung volume reduction is created by scar formation. Only upper lobe predominant emphysema is treated in this by this technique, and this is considered as an alternative in patients after surgical LVLS fails. The next is airway coiling technique. So in this, alloy of nickel and titanium called nitinol material coils are used. It's commercially called as Numrex. Effects are seen within 2 to 4 weeks. So 10 to 12 coils are delivered in the most diseased loads, and it is controlled by using fluoroscopy. The preferred patients are patients with for bilateral lung treatment with heterogeneous involvement. And a Turkish study has shown that this also has an impact on type 2 respiratory failure with a significant decrease in PCO2 after the procedure. The risk of this technique is there are the incidence of pneumothorax with pneumonia, COPD exacerbations, transient chest discomfort, and hemoptysis. And the cost of this coiling is quite high, around $53,000. The next technique is the biological lung volume reduction. So in this technique, a sealant is placed at the bronchus, and that seals off that area. So the rapidly polymerizing sealant, polyvinyl alcohol and pentane, called hydrogel, or a biological gel called bio-LVR, or a chemical form is used. So post procedure, it was noted that there was a increase in by 15% of FEV1, increase of around 28 meters in the 6-minute walk distance, and improvement in the FVC and DLC of 9%, and there was a improvement in the St. John's Respiratory Questionnaire change of around 9 points. So this technique is independent of collateral ventilation. The complications which were noted in these studies were aspiration, pneumonia, and pulmonary embolism. However, there was no procedure-related deaths in the study done by Earth et al. This was the first study that came in 2011. But a subsequent trial called Aspire trial showed that there was significant hospitalizations in the group which received biological lung volume reduction, and 2 deaths also, and the study was abandoned. So the next one is the airway bypass stenting. So in this, an extra anatomic bronchial fenestrations are done to deflate the emphysematous lung. So this is best in homogeneous emphysema. We know that there's a lot of collateral ventilation in this. So it depends on collateral ventilation. There's a short-term improvement in the FVC, but in the studies which was done, that is a East trial, the short-term improvement in FVC returned to baseline by the 6th month. However, there was no mortality difference between the bypass or sham controlled arm. The reason that they have attributed for this is that the bypass stent gets occluded quite easily. Actually, in this study, they have used a drug-eluting stent, which was eluting paclitaxel, which inhibits the closure of these stents. But nevertheless, that was one of the complications which was observed. The major complication that was expected out of this was massive hemoptysis. But however, in this study, only one patient had a massive hemoptysis, which was also controlled. There was no significant mortality difference between the 2 groups. The other complications that came was COPD exacerbations, pneumomediastinum, and infections. So if you look at the overview of the bronchoscopic LVR, there is an increase in the FEV1 by around 15% in the valve, in the coil around 12%. And there is an increase in the 6-minute walk distance by 40 meters in the valve, coil, and the as opposed to the thermal vapor ablation, which had around 18. Overall, the death rates was around 2.5 to 3.5, and we saw in the surgical group in the NET trial it was around 7.5%. So it was significantly lesser than when compared to surgical procedure, the bronchoscopic LVR mortality. The few statements that have been included in GOLD 2020 about lung volume reduction surgery is that LVRS improves survival in severe emphysema patients with upper lobe emphysema and low post rehabilitation exercise capacity. And about the bronchoscopic interventions in select patients with advanced emphysema, these interventions reduced end expiratory lung volume and improved exercise tolerance, health status, and lung function at 6 to 12 months following treatment. So conclusion, we saw that surgical LVRS, we have a open median sternotomy surgical LVRS versus a VATS LVRS. There's a high short-term mortality in surgical LVRS with post-op complications going more than 50%. And this bronchoscopic lung volume reduction came as a treatment option for these patients who were unfit for undergoing surgery. And we saw about the different techniques that are available, the endobronchial, intrabronchial, and valves and coils, and the thermal vapor ablation, whether it is blocking, non-blocking, reversible, and the dependence on collateral ventilation. All these, out of all these techniques which are available, the endobronchial valve is being approved by the FDA. So, and also the 90-day mortality in surgical LVRS around 5.2% as opposed to the stents, which is 0.5, and valves, the mortality at 6 months is 2.8%. So we see that selected patients have a potential of significant benefit in terms of lung volume, lung function, exercise capacity, and survival of these by using these techniques.